the life, the drama, the tears, the happiness.
I hated it. I was thrown out halfway through, and thank God, actually.
I made some very close friendships, obviously with Peter Gabriel.
The best gig I've ever been to was Otis Redding in '67 when I sneaked out of school and went to this Ram Jam club in Brixton.
And I used to play the piano and he would sing, and we'd do sort of Otis Redding numbers and Nina Simone and things like that in the sort of dining room in the school.
We started doing some songwriting. There was like sort of two pairs, really, although Ant Phillips was almost involved in both, but myself and Anthony Phillips, and then Tony Banks and Peter Gabriel were another pair. We wrote material separately, and then we made our first demo tape at a friend's garage.
And so it was from that tape that we first got any interest, the interest from Jonathan King, who was an English producer, which sort of got the whole thing underway.
This is 21 years ago, and I was then a teenager. I'd just left school, went back to my old school in Triumph. The little school band, who were like 2 or 3 years younger than me, came rushing up to me and said, "Please, Mr. King, listen to our little cassette tape. We're very talented. We'd like to be made into stars, but we don't have a name." I gave them the name Genesis, recorded their first album, produced it, and it didn't really do much.
That may have been due to the fact that, though talented, Genesis was new to the music business.
I think it's important for people to realise that just prior to our live performances, becoming a live band, we spent about 6 months in a cottage, a French cottage in Dorking, in Surrey, and we were completely removed from the business and from any outside music, really. And that was when we first, I think, learnt the kind of way we're going to be Genesis.
And with that realization came the first of many personnel changes for the band.
Yeah, we arrived and I was too early to audition. So they said, "Do you want to go for a swim?" So I thought, swimming pool? Yeah, that's fantastic. So I went for a swim, and while I was swimming, all the other drummers were auditioning, and I learnt by their mistakes what I was supposed to do. So by the time I got on the drum kit, I was pretty slick.
I'd heard their album, and I was interested in a certain kind of sound they had because I couldn't quite pin down what the instruments were when they were playing. They had this 12-string sound like 12 strings or harpsichords, and that was a Genesis trademark, and that was something that I was very much into. I'd just bought a 12-string. So in a way, we've been going along sort of parallel paths in some extent, to some extent, and it was all to be joined with the first album that we did called Nursery Crime.
With this new lineup, the group began to grow both visually and musically, blossoming from cult status into a wide-open future.
Those days, if you were a good live band, you could work hard, build up a following, and get something going.
Well, a typical gig would be us leaving, I suppose. We'd play one end of England one day and then the other end the next. So we'd be leaving about 8 or 9 in the morning.
Pete used to drive the gear around. He had a big London taxi. He used to drive the gear around in a taxi. I had a yellow, rusty Ford Anglia, and Tony had a little Austin A7. It was 3 cars.
We'd break down a couple of times on the way up because the van we had never made it to one place without breaking down. And then we'd do a sound check and so we'd obviously, at that point we're still our own roadies as well, so we'd get the gear out and set it up. And it would probably be a college or university or a small club.
And the first gig we set up in a row, 2 rows, 3 deep. It was ridiculous, I had no idea what we were doing. We actually got an encore our first gig.
And things continued to get better as their audience grew.
I mean, I remember the thrill of playing in Italy, playing in Rome, the strains of the Mellotron starting off Watcher of the Skies, where the whole building was shaking like thunder. I mean, it really did sound like a spaceship coming into land.
The world
wasn't really until Pete Gabriel started putting in quite so many costumes, and so that we had the combined visual effect of lights and costumes and masks, that really, suddenly the presentation changed everything, and it elevated the band's performance to calling it theatre.
This, to us, was perhaps Jerusalem boogie, but to the birds it meant supper is ready.
Everything, we're growing everything. We got some in, we got some out. That's wild things floating about.
He started off by wearing things, you know, that would put him in the character of what he was singing about. And that developed out of all proportion with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, where he dressed up as the Slipper Man in this huge bulbous rubber outfit. Couldn't get a microphone anywhere near him. And at that point, I think we all thought, this is probably as far as we'll go like this.
He found, you know, the band situation unworkable.
As far as everybody, the media was concerned, he wrote everything. So, you know, we were just musicians playing his songs. But in fact, it was a 5-piece writing group, really.
Peter, when we'd been making The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, had sort of felt like he was going to want to leave. I mean, it had been a bad time in a way. And, you know, I think our personal relationship had somewhat got a bit strained as a result of that. A lot of the reasons were personal. We couldn't really, he was the first of us to have a child, and the group wasn't really ready to accommodate the kind of time you need.
The first baby that I had was in a very dicey situation for 3 weeks in an incubator, and the doctors didn't think she was going to make it. And that, obviously, when that sort of thing happens, it's much more important than anything else.
Pete wrote all the words to The Lamb because we all agreed that maybe one person should write the story. And I think, I personally think that once someone has a taste of that, you know, that you don't really want to go back.
How that affected the band was that I wanted the situation where I could follow other interests and do other projects.
Pete got an offer from William Friedkin because of Pete's story on the back of the first live album, to maybe collaborate on some screenplay ideas.
He was at that time collecting people from all sort of Hollywood virgins to put together an interesting sort of sci-fi film of sorts. And it sounded quite interesting to me.
It was obvious that now was the time for Peter Gabriel to exit from the band. The big question remaining was how would Genesis fans react to his departure?
Melody Maker came out with a picture of Pete on the front. I looked at it, I couldn't believe it. It said, Gabriel quits Genesis. And inside was an obituary, you know. It was as Genesis, well, what a great group they were. But of course, everybody was sort of saying, there was letters to the Melody Maker next week saying, oh, I can't believe they split up. You know, so we haven't split up, we're just writing some music.
The Office went through loads and loads of tapes, you know, the ones that were obviously no-hopers, they kind of rejected, and then they sent the rest down to us.
And we had a lot of weirdos, because of Pete and all the costume thing. Right?
Yes.
But all sort of weird photographs that appeared of you know, guys in sort of odd masks and things, you know.
And we listened to them, and from that we selected about half a dozen people who we actually auditioned in person.
We auditioned many people and actually took a guy into the studio only to find out that really the guy we wanted was the girl next door.
We'd always thought that Phil would probably sing some of the softer things because he had done in the past, and we thought we could increase that share, you know. But we weren't too sure how he would cope with the screaming stuff.
As you can see, Phil had no problem with the screaming. It was relating to the audiences between songs that worried him.
He was more worried about the talking in between songs than the singing, right? And he had his little notes, right?
Hello, everybody.
I watched his hand doing that, right? He was trying to read what he'd written down. Right? I'll never forget that.
Right, well, anyway, as I said before, we're going to try and do something very, very heavy here. We're going to try and get in touch with the other world. Right. So what we're going
I think he's very good. He's a natural sort of all-rounder, and I think it was a good challenge for them when I disappeared, and he sort of stepped in very well, I think.
Phil handled both singing and percussion duties on vinyl, but for live shows, the group needed another drummer. Bill Bruford was picked to fill the slot, but at the same time, he was forming his own band, UK.
I remember going out and buying a lot of records to see if there's any other English drummers that I hadn't thought of. And there really wasn't anybody that I wanted, I thought I'd like to hear play the stuff, So I had heard a Frank Zappa album of Chester playing with Ralph Humphrey, and thought that as he's so good with two drummers that he might fit in. And he'd heard of Genesis, but I don't think he'd heard much of the music. So it was an interesting thing for him to do, because he'd never played this kind of music before.
We had a total of 9 days for that first tour that I did. And I mean, they already knew the stuff, so it was routine to them, but I was working pretty much around the clock trying to get everything together, just 4 or 5 hours of sleep and the rest of the time working.
Would you welcome, please, all the way from Los Angeles, California, on the drums, Mr. Chester Thompson!
Rebounding from Peter Gabriel's departure in 1975, Genesis went on to release 3 acclaimed albums. It was after the tour for the live Seconds Out album that the band was faced with another crisis.
It was a 2-year battle within myself. I thought, shall I, shan't I? Am I developing within the group? Are enough of my songs being done by the group? And the answer to that was no.
He did do one solo album. Well, when Peter first left, he did a solo album, but consequently didn't, I don't think, contribute that much to the next Genesis album, Trick of the Tail. You just didn't have time to do both. We had to keep the pressure on, particularly over here, where the band was still, very much sort of like second division group. And we wanted just to sort of try and make the audience grow,
We don't feel you're right behind the band, etc. I said, well, it's rather difficult, I've got, on one hand, a record company phoning me up saying, where's our product? You are committed. And they're approaching me with lawyers, telling me to knuckle under, the band's telling me to knuckle under. So from both sides, pressure.
After the Seconds Out tour, the band returned to the studio to mix the album. It was then that Hackett made his choice.
I was going to the studio, and I passed him on the street, and I said, Steve, hop in, I'll give you a lift, He said, no, it's okay, I'll call you later. So I got to the studio, I said, I just passed Steve, he said he's going to give me a call. And he said, haven't you heard? I said, no. And then Steve rang up and he said, Phil, I think it's best I leave, So I said, righto. Put the phone down, that's right, now, put the tape on, It was very strange way to leave.
Along with you, I will follow you, follow me,
Collins, Rutherford, and Banks chose to remain a trio, and Then There Were Three was released, and the threesome enjoyed their first big hit with Follow You, Follow Me. Mike Rutherford made the switch from bass to guitar, but when it came to live material...
I wasn't sure if we wanted a bass player guitarist or a guitarist bass player.
I was the first guy to audition in America, and he said, I think that'll be enough, I think you're the one. And I thought, really? I mean, what did I do? I just played Squonk, and I played a song called Down and Out, and something else, I can't remember. And he said that would be enough. I thought maybe that was his way of putting me off.
He had a feel for what the songs were about. When he's playing, his technique is fantastic. I'm still in awe of it,
The wonderfully, fantastically fabulous Mr. Darryl Stelmach!
After the departures of Peter Gabriel and Steve Hackett, Genesis was now fully adjusted to being a trio. They let go of their past and entered a new era of style and popularity.
I'm not saying we wouldn't be where we are now with, without the changes, but we found some good in it, I guess. We seem to really pull together and bring out some of the best things under a kind of challenge, when Pete left and Steve left, and all those things seem to give us a new challenge, which I think we respond to very well.
We've done a complete circle. We've gone into writing almost as individuals on the number 3, back to the way right now, which is completely as a group.
Fewer people in the group, the easier it is, probably,
That's why next year.
Phil's comedic personality was a sharp contrast to the ethereal Peter Gabriel. Along with the more down-to-earth style came changes in the band's lyrics.
I think the lyrics changed as people change, you know. I mean, people say you don't play the same kind of stuff as you used to, you know, why not? And I answer them, you know, do you read the same kind of books as you used to? Do you dress the same way as you used to? Do you have the same ideas as you used to? And they usually say, well, no. And I said, well, why the hell should we play the same kind of music then? You know, we change, and we are kind of open to as much change as anybody.
Unlike the old days when the band members showed up at studio sessions with individual song ideas, the new lineup also devised a new technique for songwriting.
It's not till we get together as a band that we actually start pooling ideas, and that's normally the rehearsal room.
But that moment when it all comes together,
Yes.
it makes you want to be in a group.
That technique proved to be a success on the Duke, Abacab, and Genesis albums.
I think the last Genesis album, compared to other Genesis albums, was very different as well. I mean, it was the first true group album we'd had for ages, because we had no material written. We just went in there cold, sat down, started writing, and all the stuff like Mama and Home by the Sea and things like that just came out of thin air, really. In Genesis, at the moment, we get on better now than we ever have done, and the last album was really good fun to make because we did it from scratch, and we all felt very involved in it. And it didn't get in the way of the solo things because there was no solo songs involved, it was just all group stuff. So really everything's ticking over. If we just had the group, I think we'd all like wonder, apart from want to do anything else, you'd wonder if there was anything else outside.
Tony Banks began his solo career with a 1979 album called A Curious Feeling.
It contained some of the best music I'd written to that date, particularly if there's those sort of people who like perhaps some of the more, I don't know, things like Firth the Fifth or the later parts of Supper's Ready and things like that. It's just sort of the same kind of more intense kind of thing, I suppose, you know, less, perhaps slightly less straight rock and roll. You know, I'm probably always a bit further away from straight rock than the other two. I mean, the music I've written, I've done with Genesis over the years and on my own and things, is I've written so much stuff that has an obvious kind of visual connection. But it hasn't had a specific one, you know. So now we do Genesis about 50% of the time, and the other 50% of the time we can do what we like. So now when we come back together as a group, it's always exciting, really, because we all have new things to offer. We've been working in different ways with different people, have different ideas, and you get, I think, a very a kind of different combination. It's almost like a different group every time you get together.
One's very critical about one's own voice, and the reaction I got back was very nice, and also people didn't think that's how I was going to sound. You know, they had an image of how my voice was going to be and the kind of songs I was going to be writing, and what I produced wasn't at all like that, so I kind of went with that title, seemed to go. I shocked them all.
Mike Rutherford's album, Acting Very Strange, was his second solo album as a member of Genesis. A third album was in the cards, but it didn't necessarily mean he was leaving the band.
The big difference with Genesis is that the reason we do stuff, we've done stuff outside the band, is nothing to do with dissatisfaction with what happens in the band, as is normally the case. It's just that here are three guys who've been playing together for the last X number of years, and if all you do is to play with the same two other people, it gets very, it's not enough really. I mean, you need to have other influences. I call it Mike and the Mechanics because it's, I don't see this one as a solo album. I decided last year that in fact I'm better working in collaboration with other people. It brings much better things out of me, so I wanted to make it a group effort.
The Mechanics is more of a, I don't know, kind of off the wall. It's not throwaway, don't get me wrong, but it's more a fun thing. It's something Mike wanted to do, and then he involved me and Paul Carrick and the other guys. And it was something we just turned up and we had fun, and it was easy.
Here, Mike, you can pay the lads.
That's an easy way to make a living.
Now love, don't come
I think I'd probably get bored doing just one thing.
The success of the new Genesis launched solo careers for its three members, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks, and the prolific Phil Collins, who has emerged as one of the most talented singer-songwriter-performers in rock and roll. It was his first album, Face Value, that sent Collins rocketing to the top, where he remains today.
It was my big moment so far, I think, in terms of a transition from what I was to what I am, whatever that may be. Face Value was the result of my divorce and a situation with, not having my children. I'd known my wife since I was at school, and I have my son. And as far as I was concerned, my whole life suddenly was in pieces.
I'm putting the pieces back together again.
I mean, I love to cover other people's material. I'm not a sort of the songwriter that does his own material and no one else's. So that's why I did it. I mean, the 60s are part of my history.
On his first two albums, Phil concentrated on the music, keeping his videos simple and entertaining. He held to that philosophy for his Take Me Home video, which was kept simple by shooting it on tour.
It was thought about, the bit of paper that Jim Yukich still has with, crossed out Paris, Tokyo, crossed out Bremen, all those cities. I mean, there's quite a manic bit of paper that he's got there with all these bits of the ideas, but it was actually thought about.
The montage of cities in Take Me Home was indicative of his work schedule. His same-day Live Aid performances in London and Philadelphia, and the series of concerts he gave for the Prince's Trust were all done between producing and touring duties with Genesis. This unstoppable energy won him 3 Grammy Awards in 1986.
I really, honestly and sincerely didn't think that I would come away with anything, maybe more than one, if I was lucky, because, it's a very strong year, there's a lot of good records around, and just to get here nominated, the way I feel about things, I feel very proud just to get that far.
Phil continues to be the busiest man in show business as a solo artist and a member of Genesis. He's doing what he loves most, and he's getting paid for it.
I've never done a proper job, so this is all I've ever done. This is, and to me, this is just an accumulation of everything I've ever done, and it won't stop here, I hope.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Phil's performance and writing ability, and just the way he presented the whole concept as a musician, as an artist. And being a drummer, we have a lot of things in common.
It wasn't a big, heavy business thing. We sat around and had a cup of tea with him, he, Mark and myself. And before the song was written, we agreed to work together.
Who couldn't get along with Phil? He's wonderful.
If being a member of a #1 rock band, a songwriter, a freelance drummer, and a father isn't enough to fill a schedule, Phil Collins has also become one of the most sought-after producers today. His producing career started back in 1982 with Frida Lyngstad of ABBA.
I think Stig Anderson rang our manager and said, would Phil like to do Frida's album? I said yes. I thought it was an interesting combination, and it was something that I'd never done before.
So you really tried to take out those things that I felt, in a way, was somewhere inside,
It became apparent that I would be a real producer. My attitude towards producing is all this amazing technology that we have now is really, to me, means nothing compared to the 2-, 3-, and 4-track days of George Martin. And all I do as a producer is really direct the music into a certain direction that I like. I don't think producing is very hard, to be honest. I mean, all you've got to do is a good pair of ears and a sense of right and wrong, good and bad, and you could call yourself a producer if you wanted to. I've had offers from Tina Turner and Ronnie Spector and Al Jarreau and Liza Minnelli, all kinds of weird people. I mean, just people that you wouldn't necessarily assume that would ask me. Def Leppard,
Why are these people after Phil Collins? One of the reasons may be his ability to produce hits.
What I do is just help people make records. I mean, people like Eric, who is a good friend of mine.
I actually like his pace because he's not as reckless as people think he is in terms of speed. He doesn't work that fast. He just works steady.
I was given free rein and a lot of confidence. He gave me confidence to do it.
And he's undistractable. You see, he goes at it and he won't. He's like a bull terrier. He won't let go of it.
Phil's perseverance as a producer led to a second collaboration with Eric Clapton and an album called August.
There's a couple of people like Aretha Franklin and Steve Winwood I'd like to produce. I've never been asked, but I'll just put that out in case they're watching.
Went their separate ways in the 70s, fans held little hope that Genesis would ever reunite. But one night in the autumn of 1982, it happened. It all started when Peter Gabriel...
I spent with a group of people from Bristol about 2.5 years trying to get together a concert with basically world music and rock. And we had sort of 600 artists from 21 countries, and it was a fantastic event, only it lost a pile of money.
And we said, listen, you know, this is ridiculous. It's going to make him bankrupt if he just does that, and it's not really his fault. It's a brave thing to do. Let's do a gig and give him the money.
You know, it says in the paper you won't be appearing. So I said, sod that, I haven't been asked. So I flew back immediately, phoned them up, and said, look, I'd very much like to do it.
The best thing we ever did, and I was the strongest one on this, was to not film it or record it. Because on the day it was fantastic. It was a rainy day, raining and mud, good old England. 60,000, 70,000 fans there, and the atmosphere was fantastic. It was an emotional moment.
It was really funny because going back to suddenly, it was switching suddenly straight back to 75, you know. All the same mistakes were being made all over the place, you know. Pete, you know, got back to his old kind of mic technique, which was like this. Because when I see him sing on his own, he sings great, you know, no problem at all. But it was always this thing, you know, the microphone miles away from his thing because he was charging around stage so much. And even Phil with the drummers, it was just sort of certain little things happened that in a way that hadn't happened for years, you know.
I sat behind the drums and we played Supper's Ready, and my hands were like playing what I played 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And I was saying, come on, you know, this is 1982, play, Christ, you know. And it took me ages to get, I was very depressed after the first rehearsal. I thought, I'm all washed up, you know, I can't do it anymore. But I've, you know, after 2 or 3 rehearsals, I got into the spirit of the thing.
I said to Pete afterwards, nobody got more out of it than me. I had a very good time.
A flower.
Suddenly, we were the first theatrical rock band.
Peter Gabriel was good at wearing the sort of costumes and carrying that side of things off. And when he left, that kind of went with him a bit, really.
But Genesis maintained their strength as a visual band. Phil Collins' comedic nature encouraged audience participation, and the band continually enhanced its stage show, culminating with their revolutionary development of colored lights, technically known as Vari-Lights.
The lights, what we've got is a system at the moment of about 130-odd lights, each of which is capable of producing any color.
Half the lights have an arc light source, the other half of the lights have an incandescent light source, and then they're housed in a fixture with motors that make them do the things they do. They pan, they tilt, they change color, they change beam size, and they hard and soft focus.
I think particularly Mike and I sort of get very concerned with the lights, and we spend a long time with the lighting, 2 lighting operators we have. What we tend to do is go put the lights through their paces to see what they can do, you know, the extremes of what they can do. We put a lot of smoke up and just see the best effects. And when we see some effects we think are really good and really strong, we try and sort of think of moments in the music where we could fit them.
Any movement effect is special because it's something that you can do that you couldn't otherwise do unless stuff like Vari-Light existed.
There are some colors that Vari-Light will get that you can't get anywhere else. You can get close, but you can't get the saturation, the deepness of color.
I wish that I could really tell you all the things that have happened to me.
Alan Owen, who does our main stage lighting, he's been with us since Selling or the Lamb. Was it the Lamb?
Lamb.
Been with us since then.
The operation.
And Tom Luttrell, who actually has been with us last tour with the early stage Vari-Lights, when we had about 40 of them, and this tour. Very, I mean, they're musical. Well, can be musical, but very efficient. That's you know, very professional. So if you know, we have a good team with us, and it definitely helps. fantastic. Wasn't it fantastic?
Great.
It's really fantastic. We're only as, you know, as good as popular or as good as successful or whatever as the last record. So we never sit back on our laurels. I mean, so we've had a lot of success in the past with Genesis, and every album has sold consistently more than the last one. But there's always a chance that's going to stop, and we write the music for ourselves and make it sound as good as we can, put it out and hope people like it, and they seem to like it.
They began in 1967 as a rock and roll band. They changed lead singers in 1975, adopting a new style but remaining a rock and roll band. Today, they all have solo careers, and today, Genesis is still a rock and roll band.
I know all you lot out there find it quite difficult to understand how we can do all these different projects, but for us, it's perfectly natural.
It's been proven that Genesis is the prime example of a band that can survive the solo careers, or the respective solo careers, of all the members.
I think doing the solo stuff has undoubtedly sustained the life of the band. There's no way we could have, you know, I mean, it would be an awful long time. I mean, even since Phil joined the band as the new boy in 1970, it's still 16 years since then. And if we'd been doing only Genesis since then, I think we would be, there's no way we could have survived.
They're moving on, they've moved on in a separate direction, and they've still got the foundation of old stuff. And I feel, you know, free of that and sort of a little more able to move, not being part of that. So I think we've both gained.
Genesis is the sort of continuing thing that we keep on doing, and we're still well into it.
It's like Peyton Place, you know.
I couldn't be in this band if I didn't get on well with the other guys, so I'd find it very tedious. There's still a spark when we get together. I mean, it still is a great pleasure to write together and things like that.
The idea of a group is to be a reflection of the individuals. There's no point in me becoming what people think I am, or what people think I should be, or what the others think I should be, or even what I think I should be in Genesis. It really should be a reflection of what, you know, what I am, but bouncing off the other guys' opinions as well, you know, the other guys' music and their ideas. So how does it end?
We interrupt this program to bring you an update on Genesis. Here now is Mike Rutherford.
Hello, good evening. This is Mike Rutherford from Genesis. We thought we'd invite you here backstage so you can see what goes on at a concert before and after and during. You can see how we cheat, how we don't really play, how we mime, and it's all taped and stuff like that. Actually, we do play.
We always all like the most recent stuff best of all. It's kind of what you've just done, and it's what you want to be doing most of all. And so you choose as much of that as you can, as much as is playable. On this album, we're playing virtually everything apart from Anything She Does, which was a difficult song to do. And other than that, we just sort of go back through our past with songs that we still have an affection for. The emphasis always tends to be on more recent stuff, I think, but we're doing songs going back as far as 1973 on this tour, because speaking for myself, I'm proud of our whole career, really, and I like songs from every period.
Or like with this tour we're doing, Supper's Ready. The end of Supper's Ready. So that's one of the reasons why it's good to be in a group, because I will choose a couple of old songs that maybe someone hasn't thought of, or Tony might do the same, or Mike might do the same. And before you know it, you've got about 3-4 hours worth of material, which you've got to prune down to a couple of hours. So there.
Confusion is a song, it's almost a protest song. I actually wrote the lyrics to this one. It's a song that is the nearest I've ever come to actually making an out in the open statement. I normally make little comments about things in a subtle sort of an aside way. It's really about how we live in a very nice world and what a mess we're making of it, and how it should all be so easy and how it's all so difficult. It's a kind of 80s protest song. It's taken me this long to write my first protest song.
Well, the Brazilian it's kind of much closer to the kind of thing I do on some of my solo albums, you know. So if you like the Brazilian, you should go and buy them. It's which no one does. I'm not very good at writing sort of love songs anyhow. Phil writes them much better, so I leave the short, you know, those kind of things up to him.
You know I love you, but I just can't take this. You know I love you, but I'm playing for keeps. Although I need you, I'm not gonna make this. You know I want to, but I'm in too deep. So listen, listen to me. Your eyes go through me.
This time is the first tour we've actually brought a complete set of Vari-Lights with us. This is the first tour anyone's ever done it, actually. They've just designed a brand new light, which is the Power Light. And it's basically, we used to be Vari-Lights and the lights they call the Power Lights, which are the kind of lights that give you the general colour. But this time we've designed this light that, or we've had designed this light that does both. So it's the first time that has happened, and it seems to be working very well. It's it gives all those Vari-Lights gives an opportunity to completely change the shape of the stage, which is quite exciting to look at.
Oh, right. So come right. Look, it's not boring yet.
Liven
So that's
it up,
good
he said.
to get. Okay, okay.
So
Well,
I thought I'd come in and liven
that doesn't liven it up, you know.
Use that and I'll kill you.
All right. Okay.
You can't go in there like that. I got 2 of these tonight. I got 1 last night, 2 tonight. I got 2 bras last night and a shoe, and I got 3 extra bras tonight. So when I retire, it's a lingerie shop for me.
This is our deck drummer for the evening. We couldn't find anyone.
Gallagher.
Couldn't find a professional drummer, so this is what we got.
That's it. Jess has been with the band, I say, for 10 years, and I first came to hear of him with a Frank Zappa album called Live at the Roxy. And Bill Bruford had just left us to form UK, and I was looking for drummers, and I couldn't find any English drummers that I liked enough. So I started buying some albums of American drummers and heard this Live at the Roxy album with Frank Zappa, and Chester was on it playing with another drummer. And he did a couple of drum things together with this other drummer, which were great double drums. And in fact, we used that same lick that I heard on that album. We used it on the end of Afterglow. We use it all the time. It's just one of those classic drum fills. And I don't know whether we actually are going to present him with a gold watch. I think we should do. We should at least do something. I think my batteries have just run out.
I was doing a show in San Francisco. I was doing a company of the Wiz, just playing drums for the show. And I got a phone call from Phil, basically saying, look, I saw you at Weather Report. You want to do the gig with Genesis? And that was, I mean, it was just as cut and dry as that.
You're on MTV, man. And as we fondly bid farewell to Chester Thompson.
When Steve Hackett left the band, I wasn't sure if he wanted a bass player guitarist or a guitarist who could play bass. And I did quite a few auditions and saw various people. And then Darryl came along in New York, and we automatically, I thought, hell, he'll do.
Would you welcome, please, a nice Canadian welcome, please, for on the guitar and the bass guitar, our good friend, Mr. Darryl Sterner!
I'm very bad at remembering parts, and Darryl is very good, so he has to remind me of the chords of the songs that I wrote, you know, a few years ago, which is why he's with us.
Mike Rutherford, in fact, auditioned me in New York City, and from there it's history, basically. What do you want to know?
Do you remember what the first gig was?
No, I don't. I don't. I can't tell you that.
Great on film.
I don't know what the first gig was. This is no good for you.
But if we don't know the chords of a song, when the 3 of us are thinking about it, we wait until Darryl arrives and he teaches us all how to play it. He's a great musician.
That's all. No, I think the thing I dislike most about touring is flying, which is something I I'm sort of better at it than I used to be, but I don't like flying at all. I'm a very nervous flyer, and you have to do so much of it when you're in a group. But I decided a long time ago, when we first started going on the road, that I either had to accept it or give up being in a group, and I decided I would accept it.
Maybe next tour I could stay in the same hotel as you guys. Okay? Yeah. A Holiday Inn's a nice hotel.
vodka that you saw me with last night before the show. That's all I had to do. Does that sound?
Yeah.
Oh.
To describe a sound check, I heard Charlie Watts in an interview the other day when he was asked what the Rolling Stones meant to him, and he said 5 years of work and 20 years of hanging around, which is actually a wonderful description of what being in a group is. There is an awful lot of hanging around and waiting. The most important thing we're after at a sound check, apart from running through a couple of songs, just so we hear what the sound's like in the hall, and the sound man who's mixing the sound out in the audience can get a rough idea of how the show's going to be, is to just kind of get, and you've got to check all your gears working. The most important thing is just to sort of feel acclimatized to the hall.
Can I live together? Can I live apart? That's the situation. Known it from the start. Every time that I look at you, I can see that future. 'Cause you know, babe, I don't wanna go. Just throwing it all away. Throwing it all away.
Read my jacket.
Should we go on first, warm the crowd up, and then the scene comes on? It's da-da. Will you welcome, please?
Oh, they left me behind, that's the thing. Hi. Hi.
Oh no, this is the last album. This is the last tour. I thought you'd like to know. Every album we make and every tour we do is described by people around us as the last album, the last tour. And we don't know, so I don't know how they know.
But the show itself is the most entertaining part for me. I really enjoy, I'm not a natural performer on stage, but I do enjoy being up there and being part of a sort of, there's something very exciting about being sort of part of a thing where it involves more people than just you to produce the sound. It's a sort of exciting thing because it's something that can only come together when you're all in the same place.
Well, we're going to wrap it up now. I've got to go back to bed. And I hope you have more of an insight now as to just what makes this thing tick. The life, the drama, the tears, the happiness, the eccentricity behind the scenes of a Genesis show. We got to go. See you later.
chart-topping trio, MTV delves deep inside Genesis from the beginning.
When I listen to the old Genesis stuff, I get embarrassed by some things and I'm proud of other things.
Genesis from the beginning. Today, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 Central. And again at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 Central on MTV Music Television.